Welcome. I'm Edith Tinkin, CEO of Smart Brain Insights, and you have joined Smart Brain Insight podcast. Today, we are continuing the conversation with the COO of Neuralink, Tian Vermeulen. Tian, are you with me?
I am with you, Edith. Thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic. Last week, we were talking a little bit about the physiology of the brain. Today, our topic is focusing on neuroplasticity. And I would like to, before we get into the neuroplasticity conversation, remind everyone that we stand for the concept of neuroagility, that everyone who has a brain, and I hope you do, can really develop. And neuroagility is this opportunity for us to acquire information, process information, and return the information to the world with ease, speed, and flexibility. Now, that is only possible when we have this beautiful thing in our brain called neuroplasticity. You are a physiologist, Tian. Let's talk a little bit about the physiology of neuroplasticity and how is it that the brain can do this magnificent thing of learning, expanding, forming habits, and things like that. So we have a big topic and very little time. Let's get started.
100%. So if I think about neuroplasticity, I look at the brain where it becomes sort of, I can pull it and it still takes its form. Not in this is not in reality. If you really take a brain and you pull it, it just disintegrates. But the metaphor is you pull it and it just takes its form back. Now, if you look at the physiology of neuroplasticity, it's looking at learning, because it's the biology of learning. Your brain makes connections with other cells. So one cell connects to the next and the next and the next, and it creates a neural pathway. We refer to it as a neural pathway. Now, in that neural pathway, there are electrical responses or stimulations or impulses, and there's a chemical response to those electrical impulses. So the brain works electrochemically. So if we take it down to that's more your molecular aspect of how the brain functions. But as we think or learn or experience new situations or experience new information in our environment, our brain is powerful enough to absorb that information, and it makes those associations. So it builds onto the neural pathways that you've already established. Those little small routines and habits that you've created for yourself, that is an aspect of what neuroplasticity is all about. So there's different aspects or different stages to neuroplasticity. You have your biochemical states where the electrical and chemical state or interactions happen. Then you have your structural states, and then you have your functional state. I don't know if you've experienced there's I messed this up. Sorry, I couldn't. Sorry, I need to get my chain of thought here because I'm looking at
the short list.
So if you talk about or think about neuroplasticity, there's three different stages of neuroplasticity. You have your biochemical stages, which is the electrical impulse that stimulates your chemical release in the brain. But then you have a structural stage and a functional stage. Now, we've all experienced all those stages, even if you don't cognizantly understand or experience or feel those stages. That happens automatically. If you take the biochemical stage, when you have an electrical impulse running through one brain cell to the next, you release neurotransmitters, and neurotransmitters are the chemicals. Now, there's many feel-good neurotransmitters, and there's also quite a few inhibitory neurotransmitters. Edith, you might have experienced some of those feel-good neurotransmitters throughout the day, and then also inhibitory neurotransmitters.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what it comes to mind before you continue?
Yeah.
Playing golf. When you have a
There we go.
It's a great feeling when you have the bad shot and you're like, what did I do different? I was trying to do the same thing I did on the shot before, but it doesn't work. But that's a good comparison. And actually, I'm doing the same activity, but experiencing a different release, depending on what the outcome of that activity was.
Most definitely. And those chemicals that are released, those feel-good neurotransmitters, would have a positive impact on your emotions, the way that you are experiencing that situation at that moment. But that could also turn very quickly if your situation changes when you hit that ball incorrectly, or it just swerves out. And you think, but I just did the exact same thing. How is this even possible? So we do experience quite a up and down sort of roller coaster of these chemicals. But essentially, looking at those chemicals all are there for a purpose. They connect. Those electrical impulses run because you are making new connections. That is the starting point for neuroplasticity. Now, that's where your attitude is also an important thing. Now, Edith, you know that attitude and your intrinsic and also to an extent extrinsic motivation plays a massive role in someone's essentially their physiology, their neuroplasticity.
Absolutely.
Where have you've probably seen how that influences just the words that someone says, someone else's attitude. I can think of many different situations.
Plenty. We see that every day. Same situation, same team. One member sees it one way, the other member sees it differently. Even when we're managing change, one embraces it as a learning opportunity, the other, why do they have to change this? It was okay the way it was. Right there, you had two different reactions for the same episode.
Exactly. So, and that stems also now to your symptoms that you see within neuroplasticity, and that's where those functional changes happen. So it runs through the biochemical changes, runs through the structural changes at a point, and then it becomes a functional change, and that's where the development implications lie. So you have your two worlds connecting with neuroplasticity. You have your physiology, your sciences, and what's happening biologically within the brain. But you also, it then stems out into resulting into a functional change or behavior that you can see with the individuals. Now, there's also, if I look at this, there's a negative feedback loop as well. It tries to have and if I say negative feedback loop, it just runs back to those structural or the biochemical changes. So if I think negatively about myself, immediately I'm going to create more neural pathways, and that's still in the realm of neuroplasticity, whether it's in a good or positive way or in a negative way, it's still neuroplasticity. If I tell myself I can't do something, I'm actually limiting myself in the way that I am thinking. And that is what agility is all about, is being ready in all situations to be as flexible and as agile as possible so that I can take on whatever the environment throws at me. That is what neuroplasticity is. Neuroplasticity is the biology of learning.
Fantastic. It's interesting to learn that sometimes our belief is creating sort of the structure, the way I'm understanding what you're saying, is creating that structure that supports whatever we believe. So like it's almost like the brain is assisting us in making sure that what we believe happens. Am I right on saying that?
Because yes.
Sometimes I try to help people in my work, Tien. I try to help people understand how powerful are your thoughts and how reframing the thought might help you become more positive person, more of a learner, more of a feeling well, having what I continue to call it the brain health that you need. right? And have a life that is worth living, I call it. And this idea that whatever we put in our mind is what is going to happen, because your brain is going to assist you in whatever you believe you wants to happen. That's his job, is to help
100%.
you get there. Is
100%.
that
100%. I agree with you, because you create a baseline from where you need to work. And that is that's the beauty of what makes us all also different, because we all have different experiences. We interpret the environment also in a different way, and we build on those pathways. But if you take it, and this is from this is on the development part of neuroplasticity, but when you can have people that come out of a household where there's someone that was abusing alcohol, the one person turns out to doing very well and saying, I'm not going to follow that. They have the same baseline, but the way that they also interpreted that and their beliefs on those symptoms from the environment, or the interaction that they got from the environment, was either positive or negative. And I made certain choices to align myself to what I want to achieve. The other person says, no, well, this is what I know, and I'm going to build on those neural pathways, maybe in a more similar way. So they also become someone that abuses alcohol. Just one thing that I was thinking about now in terms of neuroplasticity, and this is more to the physiology of neuroplasticity. There's two cases. The one case was a lady that went to the doctor. This is a case study that was written up in scientific journals. She went to the doctor. She was having a little bit of headaches, not feeling well. They didn't know what was going on. They took a brain scan, and she literally did not have a cerebellum. There was no cerebellum present. Now, from a physiological perspective, that is very significant, because your cerebellum has to do with functioning of balance, of coordinating finer movements, and it's a very important structure. And if you take in proportion the amount of brain cells, by the way, we are all born with 100 billion brain cells, plus minus 100 billion. It's about 89 billion if you really want to be technical and specific. But if you take those 100 billion and you divide it by 2, 50% of those neurons are in the cerebellum. Now, she's not born, she wasn't born with a cerebellum. The amazing thing is, there's no other case of someone that's being born without a cerebellum that made it this far in life. She has 2 kids. Yes, she was a little bit slower in development, but that's the beauty of neuroplasticity. The cerebrum compensated. Exactly. The brain compensated to take over those functions. Even though it took a little bit longer, it compensated to take those functions, and it relearned or learned essentially to function without that cerebellum. Now, the amazing thing as well is, how did the brain understand that I was missing those specific functions and that I needed to take over those functions? That's the beauty of this. There was another case here in South Africa where there was it had to do with the medicine that was given to the patient, but the patient they were in a car accident, and they had extensive brain damage. The patient was the mother phoned the doctor, and because she said her son was just a little bit difficult. She didn't know what was going on with him that day, and the doctor said, just give him a half of a sleeping tablet that they refer to as Stilnox, or I think in the US it's Zolpidem. And the most amazing thing happened. There was a change in the blood-brain barrier when you do. So for individuals that have brain damage, there's a change in blood-brain barrier, and that chemical went through and it activated those neural pathways. It gave him enough I think it was like 10 years that her son did not speak to her. And after taking that 30 minutes afterwards, he said, "Mom," to her. It's amazing. And that activated and regenerated or activated those brain cells, but it laid down the foundation for him to build on more brain cells. So after a extensive period of time on that sleeping tablet, which didn't make him sleep, it actually activated the brain cells. It rejuvenated 30% of those brain cells, which were totally dead. I mean, that's just from a physiological point of view. Now, if you take it to the development point of view, you just mentioned the way you think and your belief system influences our neuroplasticity. Now, that takes you to psychoneuroimmunology. The way I think influences my body and my immune system. And there's masses of journal articles that research this topic. It's a very interesting topic to go into, but the power of your mind has an influence on the way that my body will respond. Even if I don't believe it at first, I can sort of trick my brain and my body to start responding in that way that I want to see. That's why people say manifest what you believe, because at a point you start believing
and it might happen.
Exactly. You make those neural pathways, and that's the beauty of neuroplasticity. It doesn't limit you. That's the beauty of neuroagility. It doesn't limit you.
And Tian, in closing on this chapter, I can see that on my father. My father is 92 years old. And I'm blessed to have a father with no illnesses. The guy is super healthy. And when you interview most of the people who live past 90s, and some people past 100, the idea is, what did you do that it was different to last that many years? You never hear people who said, I had a bad mindset, or I was angry in life. I mean, typically it's people who first that ate well, maintain active life, okay, and
a very big
overall their strong mind. They have that strong will. Like my father says, I don't want to die. So he's always with this, has a strong character, don't take me wrong, but that strong will is what makes him live in life like there's no problems. Every time I say, oh, Dad, this is going on, and so that's not a problem. My car broke down one time, and I called my dad and I said, can you believe it? My new car that I just bought broke down. And he says, that's not a problem. I'm like, how my car broken is not a problem? And because you can go buy another one. So fix it or buy a new one, but that's not a problem. He doesn't see problems. He only sees solutions, is what I'm trying to say. And when you live the life that way, your mind is completely different. But that is taking us towards the end of our chapter today. And the idea of neuroplasticity, for me, a takeaway is this. Understand that neuroplasticity is not just something that we talk about lightly. It's something that is a reality for each of us. And whatever we put in is what we get out. If we put in the good thoughts and the desire to be learning, going back to my dad, he wakes up every morning, he maintains himself active. He does the crosswords every morning. He actually grades himself just for fun and says, oh, 100. Oh, I missed 2. I have 98. So he was a teacher in his prior life. So the idea here is that now he maintains that spirit of being really interactive with his learning. He's always reading, learning something new, always active, maintaining a social life. It's found to be very, very important to maintain your brain health, because just like the brain has a lot of connections and network and has the ability to expand, the social connections that we have, the relationship with others, also has a massive effect in the way our brains can have that ability to continue growing and learning. So my advice to everyone is treat your friends like you treat your brain, and treat your brain like you treat your good friends. Any closing comments, Tian?
Well, but my closing comment would be, if you don't use it, you lose it. And whether you think you can or you can't, you are right. You would determine whether you can succeed or not. You are the master of your own thinking. So don't blame others for that thinking. Take control and change that neuroplasticity and be more neuroagile.
Fantastic. I wish we would have more time to talk about habit formation, but maybe we can talk it in the next episode. Thank you for being with us.
Yes.
Until the next one.